The ships groaned as they sliced through the darkened waters, their hulls cutting a steady path toward the doomed city. The ridges, once the kingdom's final unbreakable line of defence, now lay silent and abandoned. Broken arrow machines lay twisted among shattered trees. Bodies were strewn across the slopes, limbs torn apart, armour split open. Blood soaked the earth, running in dark streams down the rocks and into the sea below. From the deck of his ship, King Serian stood frozen, his breath shallow, his heart hammering violently in his chest. He watched as the invader fleet breached what remained of his defences, their soldiers spilling onto the shores of Shadow Bay like a living tide. The walls that had stood proud for centuries, walls he had believed unassailable, were now exposed, meaningless against this horror. His army, once disciplined and formidable, was shattered. The coast was already lost. As the invaders surged deeper into the city, Serian's thoughts turned not to strategy, but to his people. The civilians, families, children. They would soon face the full wrath of an enemy that did not seem bound by mercy or reason. He had prepared his whole life for war, for sacrifice, but nothing had prepared him for this. Watching his soldiers torn apart by Dustborn and Nemarian alike, he felt something he had never known before: helplessness. The moment came swiftly. Invader soldiers swarmed his ship, blades flashing. Serian barely had time to draw his sword before they struck him down, forcing him to his knees. Rough hands seized him, dragging him across the blood-slick deck. He was thrown forward, crashing hard onto the wood at the feet of the Invader King. The Invader King looked down at him, his gaze cold and utterly devoid of pity. "So," he said calmly, almost disappointed, "this is the mighty King of Shadow Bay. I expected more." Serian lifted his head, his body trembling, but his eyes burning with defiance. "You won't get away with this," he hissed through clenched teeth. The Invader King smiled, a slow, dark smile that chilled Serian to his core. "Oh, but I already have," he replied softly. "Your city is mine, your people are mine, and soon—" His eyes gleamed with quiet certainty. "The power you have hidden away will be mine as well." The sea breeze whispered through the ships, carrying the scent of blood and ruin, as Shadow Bay's fate slipped from its king's grasp. Serian's heart sank even further. He had given everything to protect his kingdom, every strategy, every sacrifice, and now it was all slipping through his fingers. As the Invader King raised his hand once more, the remaining ships surged forward, their course unmistakable, the very heart of Shadow Bay. Smoke smothered the horizon, rising from burning vessels and shattered docks. The waters that had once cradled fishermen and traders were now a floating graveyard, choked with wreckage and bodies. From somewhere beyond the carnage, the breeze from the deep ocean continued its haunting song of freedom, now tainted by the stench of death and the echoes of a kingdom brought to its knees. "My friend," Black-Eye said smoothly, stepping forward, his voice calm yet steeped in menace. "We asked only for safe passage. You turned it into a battle. Or perhaps," he tilted his head slightly, "a massacre." Still on his knees, Serian glared up at the warlock, defiance struggling against the fear flickering in his eyes. The ruins of his kingdom lay sprawled behind him, and the weight of defeat pressed down like a physical force. "Or who?" he began, his voice unsteady. "Who are you?" Before Black-Eye could answer, a voice, measured, regal, and chillingly composed, spoke from behind him. "How rude of us," it said. "We should introduce ourselves properly." The invader king stepped forward, his presence commanding the deck as surely as any blade. Pale light glinted off his armour as the dying moon dipped toward the horizon. With a theatrical sweep of his arms, Black-Eye announced, "Hail the king of my car, King Drakonis Ravenscar!" At the sound of that name, Serian's expression shattered. His eyes widened, the colour draining from his face as recognition struck like a blade to the heart. He had heard the stories. Whispered legends passed in hushed voices across taverns and courts alike. Drakonis Ravenscar, the conqueror kings feared to name aloud. A man whose wars left kingdoms hollowed out, whose victories ended not in rule, but in ruin. And now that legend stood before him. The sea whispered its mournful song as Shadow Bay's king realized the true weight of what he had faced and lost. Drakonis noticed the change in Serian's face and let out a low, amused chuckle. "So," he said softly, his voice calm and lethal, "you have heard of me." Serian barely had time to draw breath. In one smooth, unbroken motion, King Drakonis drew a knife from his belt. The blade caught the dying light for a heartbeat before it cut through the air. The strike was swift, precise, final. Serian's body collapsed to the deck as his head rolled free, lifeless eyes staring at nothing. Drakonis held the blood-slick blade for a moment longer, a twisted smile tugging at his lips. "Your reign has ended, Serian," he muttered to the corpse. He tossed the knife aside. It struck the deck with a sharp clang that echoed louder than any scream. Behind him, Shadow Bay burned. Smoke climbed into the morning sky as distant cries drifted across the bay, faint, broken, already fading. High above the chaos, a lone figure crouched on a cliffside, sharp eyes absorbing every detail of the destruction below. Without hesitation, the observer swung onto a waiting horse and vanished into the forest, cloak snapping in the wind. This was no ordinary witness, a scout from a neighbouring kingdom, and their warning would change everything. Back on the ash-choked shore, King Drakonis Ravenscar stepped onto Shadow Bay's land. His boots crunched against scorched earth as red-robed figures moved with silent efficiency, rechaining the Duskborn. The creatures snarled and thrashed, their savage purpose spent, their restraints once again drawn tight. "My lord," Black-Eye said, approaching carefully, "we should ride soon. The longer we remain, the greater the risk of resistance. Word will spread?" Drakonis did not answer immediately. He stared at the burning city, his expression unreadable, satisfaction tempered by calculation. This victory was merely a piece of something far larger. At last he turned. "You are right, Black-Eye. Time is precious," he said coldly. "We have many lands yet to fall. Prepare the horses." The order moved swiftly through the ranks. Horses were brought ashore, their hooves striking wood and stone as they were saddled for war. As Drakonis mounted, he cast one final glance at Shadow Bay, now little more than embers and memory. "Let this be a lesson," he said quietly. Shadow Bay was only the beginning.